We'll switch now for the next presentation. So it's Rob Brennan from Dublin City University and from the ADAPT project. So Rob, now you can share your screen with us. And please, if you can also share with the camera at first so we can see you if you can. And we are listening to you. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm not sure. Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. So delighted to talk to you here from Ireland. I'm speaking on behalf of the ADAPT Research Centre and Ordnance Survey Ireland. And so we have long, in geospatial linked data terms, collaboration going back to 2016. Ordnance Survey Ireland's our national mapping agency, and ADAPT is a Science Foundation Ireland Research Centre for digital content, made up of a number of universities in Ireland, led by Trinity College and DCU, where I am. And as I say, we have been working on this since 2016 when we launched our first sort of pilot. Ordnance Survey Ireland does everything I suppose you'd expect from a national mapping agency, but it includes the capture and sensing part, as well as converting data into lots of different formats and selling and distributing that, perhaps in the form of maps, perhaps in other ways, and integrating data from multiple departments across the government. So the linked data output of Ordnance Survey Ireland is housed in their sort of data repository Geohive, and the linked data part of that is called data.geohive.ie. So that's where you'll find everything I'll talk about today. So the foundation of all the data that we publish subsets of as linked data is our national map, which is a 2.5D map of the country, tracking 50 million unique spatial features across time based on sensing data with provenance and life cycles and standards-based, Inspire and with metadata as well. So that's kind of our ground truth that we're using in order to convert into linked data. So on our Geohive site, we've got information about the initiative. We have downloads of dumps, and we have access to linked data renderings of the data sets. And we actually have a GeoPubby style, excuse me, front end as well that we developed independently of the German effort. So we must compare notes. And so you see some of the types of renderings that our modified Pubby produces, where we can see the Ordnance Survey Ireland's base map, and this is the boundary data set that we started with, and we published multiple representations at different granularities for the polygons, so 100, 50 and 20 meter resolution versions of the different boundaries. And so a big thing now is that we're working with our natively, initially we started in our pilots with a kind of Frankenstein system that glued together lots of different bits of technology, but we've moved into production using Oracle Spatial and Graph, which enables a support of OR2-ORML views of the main data set. And there's been a lot of research initiatives looking at linking building information management with the national model, looking at data quality, access control issues, because as I said, OSI sells some of the data, although we have produced more and more open data during the project as well. And we've been talking about how can we support governance of the data production pipelines within OSI. So it's kind of internally focused use of linked data. Big part of the work in terms of the rollout has been sort of training of staff and knowledge transfer to make sure that the Ordnance Survey Ireland organisation and all the different partner agencies that it works with in Ireland have the skills in order to use and deploy linked data technology. And so I'm sure anyone that's been involved in rollouts of national linked data knows that sometimes the political aspects outweigh the technological. And so the state we are at now very much represents what has been achievable in that time frame from a political stance as much as the technical underpinnings. So a new data set that we released in 2019 is a buildings data set. So Prime 2 includes about 5 million buildings in Ireland. And so we have released as, I suppose, a pilot data set, all the buildings in our third city, Galway, and its surrounding county. So that's about 1.7 million buildings. You can see that we have a rendering of them again on the map. The particular building identified, this is for the main train station in Galway called Ghent train station. And in addition to defining centroids for the buildings, we define forms and functions for the buildings. This has long been used within OSI in order to categorize features. And a consequence of this, Ordnance Survey Ireland works very closely with our Central Statistics Office as the two kind of main guardians of data in the Irish government. And so once we're minting URIs for all the buildings, of course, we're creating unique geographic identifiers for those buildings as linked data. And there's a kind of national rollout going on of sharing that information amongst the different agencies in Ireland in order to make these linked data identifiers canonical and to facilitate the geocoding of data within different government agencies, etc. So one thing that I want to talk a little bit about is our sort of internally faced work on quality assessment of geospatial data and bringing linked data technology to the fore there. So here we see a schematic of the sort of data production pipeline within OSI, where on the left we start with some sensing or capture method, and then all that data is combined along with documentary data in our sort of sensing or bitmap or point clouds or documents in a sort of highly heterogeneous geographical information system. And that data, yep, thanks, is refined into a set, our set of features and geographical entities and categorizations, plus metadata and provenance that within our Prime 2 data set. And then it goes on through the data production pipeline towards various mapping abstractions and summarizations, and then finally into various sort of data publishing mechanisms or sales mechanisms. And at every point, there's potential for quality control. But one of the things that there's a lack of is being able to have end-to-end views of how quality is evolving in these various different systems and formats. And part of the problem with that, even though tools do exist, the tools tend to be specialized to different standards. So for example, Prime 2 tends to focus on ISO 19157 style quality metrics, whereas when we're publishing linked data, we're tending to follow the W3C DQV, and it's linked to ISO 2512. And so even though these are basically different views of common quality concepts, so we have a kind of data integration problem that we realize that linked data and the metadata we're generating can help us with. So the sort of thing ultimately we want to have an end-to-end quality dashboard where that we can see quality issues occurring anywhere within the pipeline. In order to do that, we're building a unified quality graph internally based on W3C data cube of observations of quality metrics. We've developed a set of mappings between all the different standards, especially the geographical data focused ones. We're deploying multiple quality tools such as Luzu for linked data, but also commercial tools like One Spatial, One Integrate, which is then uplifted into that sort of unified quality graph. And all that's giving us sort of end-to-end views over the production pipeline. Recently, with COVID, another thing that we have done in OSI is publish the national COVID data through Geohive as well as linked data, linked with our boundaries data set, so that we can record that. And this is the most complete set of open COVID data for Ireland. So I think it was a good achievement to get that as linked data. And then finally, I just want to encourage everyone here to tell us about what you're doing. Myself and Beza, who's here in the group, and Armin Haller and Brian Davis have a special issue about semantic spatial web. And we'd love to hear about these sort of systems and the challenges that you've had in building them and so forth. So I'll leave you at that point. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. There is a question on the access control. Can you tell us more about it?
Well, it was mainly led by Alan Meehan, and the idea was that, as I said, so the entire Prime 2 data set is not open data. Okay, there's a huge amount of effort goes into that, and OSI, in fact, is what we call a semi-state company. So in order to convince people that we could have open data and also various levels of access into the more closed data, but also with a RDF view of that, we developed a sort of policy-based access control system. I gave the link in the slide there to, I can't remember whether it was ESWC or ISWC paper on the access control system. But basically, you could define policies which then modify the Sparkle queries in order to enforce the access control.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. We will. I'm sorry, I have to keep the time. There are some more questions, and maybe we can answer them on the pad, or then on the Knowledge Graph in Action channel on Slack.
Yeah, and I apologize. I have to run off to a lecture as well.
Yes,
so.
yes. Thank you very much for your talk. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye. I now. We will now hear the presentation of Buyle from the Flanders Information Agency and the Ghent University. So it's our last presentation of this morning, and I think, Raf, you can now share your screen.
Okay.
And please also share your video if we can see you at least at the beginning of the talk.
I see that I have a problem with sharing my screen. My webcam. I hope I can share my screen.
Okay.
1 moment. I will share my whole screen.
Okay, so we can see your screen now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Hello, I'm Raf Buyle. I'm representing the Flemish Information Agency in Belgium, as well as Ghent University. Our agency is at the crossroads of local government, federal government, private sector, and the citizen. Now, how does the adoption of spatial linked data evolves in Flanders? We don't have a separate program for spatial linked data, but one government-wide program for all types of interoperability. So in terms of maturity, we've seen that we first, some of the innovators, not only our agency, but also other agencies, started with core data as modeling addresses, buildings, roads, and also legislation. So legislation and addresses were the first domains that were available as linked data. And then it started moving to early adopters and more data more related to business. And we've seen that there was a chasm between the mainstream market and the early markets. So people from business domain, they were contributing to working groups, but in the beginning, until I think 2 years ago, it's mainly stayed, focus mainly stayed at core data. And from, I think it started 2 years ago that we started standardizing also more business domains, and I will give some examples. So one of the latest domain that were modeled were mobility as a service, which will be applied for one of our major cities, the city of Antwerp, and also for the regional mobility center. Another domain is connecting the domain of linked data to the domain of BIM, Belgium Information Models and Linked Data. And there our Agency for Road Infrastructure is has built a model to create a digital twin of the entire road infrastructure, a fine-grained model. And then also one of the latest domains we have started is modeling the whole subsurface of Flanders. Now, one of the questions is, if you have a lot of semantics, cross-domain semantics, how do you manage your knowledge graph? So therefore, we have an interoperability program in Flanders called Open Standards for Linked Organizations. And it's within one formal governance in the region of Flanders, and we have several thematic working groups. So anyone, public, private sector, or academia, can start an open working group on a certain topic. Participants, most of the time, are a mix from private sector, public sector, and also academia. And those vocabularies, for instance, for the mobility as a service are modeled from a business perspective. So it doesn't start with models, but it starts with use cases. At this moment, we have over 4,000 definitions, which are at this moment within the standards that are published at data.vlaanderen.be, the link below. Over 400 contributors in over 40 domains. At this moment, also 4,000, by the end of the year, 4,000 new definitions will be minted. First thing we did was develop a process and method for developing data standards, because we started back in 2012, but we've seen as a bottom-up initiative from local government, but we've seen that there was lack of adoption, because to adopt those standards, it comes at a cost for all partners. And then in 2015, we moved the program to Flemish government, and the first thing was focusing on developing formal governance, which really lowered barriers for adoption, both for governments and private sector. So we have a steering committee for information ICT policy. We have a working group on data standards. They ratified the standards, and then we have several working groups that are thematic, and they publish both normative documents such as specifications, human and machine readable, and also non-normative documents which help to embed those semantic agreements in services. Now, one of the challenges was having so many participants, different working groups at the same time, over 4,000 definitions, which are published in a human and machine readable form at data.flanders.be and linked, interlinked to each other, but also linked to international vocabularies. We had a huge span of control, and we weren't able anymore to preserve quality. And therefore, together with Ghent University, we've created a tool chain. So it's a set of open source tooling that helps to manage our whole knowledge graph. So we start with UML. It's we monitor what's happening. So a piece of software is monitoring what's modeled in the working groups. Automatically, it's versioned. It's also aware of the governance process, which if you pinpoint a certain step in or specific step in the governance process, it is versioned, and then it's automatically published in a human and machine readable form. So a lot of focus is just on the processes, but not on manually creating the vocabularies. So what have we done to lower the barriers for adoption? Well, we focused on the different personas. First persona is the developer. So we developed compliance tools based on the ISA Square testbed, the European testbed, which allows to validate whether their developments or their APIs are in line with the standards we agreed upon in the working groups. Also, we have an Oslo playground where they can test their vocabularies, and we provide training. Second is the business analyst. For the business analyst, we provide human readable specification. So, we provide training on how to start a new project and integrate semantics within their own context. And we have an environment. It's called our registry of standards, where all information is not only the formal documents are there, but also all decisions, all feedback of the working groups are published at data.vlaanderen.be. By the end of the year, we will also have a knowledge graph browser, which enables them to easily search the knowledge graph just as you search in Google. So the third group was the policymakers, because yes,
2 minutes.
we focused on developers and also business analysts, mainly technical and semantical interoperability. But we've seen that we had a lot of problems on the level of the policymakers that invented or minted new concepts in policy documents, in public tenders, and other documents. And therefore, we created a third-party knowledge graph API, which will be online by the end of the year. But we're already started with beta tests with private partners. And this is an example of one of our telco providers, Proximus, together with Microsoft. They've created a plugin for Microsoft Word, which monitors what they are typing in their so what policymakers are typing in policy documents, and they scan for related concepts that we already know and the standards, and then we suggest within a certain domain which concepts they can reuse or they can automatically add a definition with a cool URI to the definition in the standard registry. And this is quite important because it's for the first time that we can bring the concept of semantics and link data to the working environment of policymakers. So as a wrap-up, we can see an adoption of geospatial and other linked data in more mainstream domains. We know that it's very important to manage the knowledge graph in a formal process, because otherwise you will get conflicts between the different domains. And also we've seen that it was very important to lower barriers for the different personas, developers, business analysts, CIOs, as well as policymakers. And that we did by providing a lot of tools as well as a lot of training. Maybe to conclude, we are open for collaboration, and we're looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Raf. It was a very interesting presentation. All presentations were very interesting. I have a question on the fact that you have several personas, and do you have also some collaboration between these different domains? For instance, the policymaker and the business data analyst, for instance, business analyst.
Well, in the working groups, we have different personas participating. I give an example from legislation, which also contains a lot of pointers to the geographical domain. Well, there are people who draft legislation, people who use legislation, people who develop for software vendors the applications. So all our working groups, we have a mix. Also, if you go to data.vlaanderen.be, we also developed together with the different group of personas, after we did a survey, training material, and it's one stack of training material, but it has different views on it for the different personas.
Okay, and maybe it's also a way to answer it, but there was a question on the definitions of are the definition only in the data model, or can they be published separately? Can they be edited also separately?
The definitions, they are published as specs comparable to W3C specs. Am I still sharing my screen, and I can just show it?
Okay. Yes.
While I'll answer. No, the specifications, they are specification comparable to W3C specifications. And if you so those are human readable specifications, but they also have context negotiation. So in human readable form, you will see URIs to international standards. But if you go to the same vocabulary and you go there as a machine, then you get a machine readable form, which contains both the definitions but also the links to the international vocabularies.
Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you to all presenters. This has been a very dense and rich session with lots of exchange. Just want to tell you that all presentation will be put on the website and recorded. Also the one for the other session, so it's an opportunity to listen and to catch up with the parallel session. And now we have a break, and we'll see back in 1 hour. So thank you for all speakers, and goodbye, everyone.